Look at that. We are live, and we are reason, religiously educated atheists, secularists, and other non-theists, aka the Secular Round Table. And we wouldn't be the fantastic, amazing, and spectacular Secular Round Table if we did not have amazing introduction music. Welcome back to another episode of the Secular Round Table podcast. You believe what? Religion is the cesspool of human ignorance. Are you fucking kidding me? Go back to your little corner, pray like 10 more times, and come back when you're ready to be fresh. Yes, I love that intro music. So, today's discussion is going to be about feminism. And I regret to inform all of our viewers that we will not be having Heina tonight. She is feeling a little under the weather and may have lost her voice. So she will not be attending tonight. But we do have Venaloid in the house. So I'm going to turn it over to Brendan, a.k.a. the Prototype Atheist, so he can get this thing started and we can formally introduce Venaloid to the show.
All right, yeah, sounds good. So this is Alex, is Venaloid on YouTube, if any of you are familiar with him. And he hasn't done many videos recently, but he has quite a bit of really good videos on his channel that I enjoy. And, you know, I came across him when I first started doing my thing on YouTube. And so he was kind enough to kind of touch up the artwork on my page that I use for like my logo and everything like that. And one of the videos of his that I often share is called The Sketchy Story of Jesus. I really appreciate that video. It gets used quite frequently in debates and things of that nature. And basically it's just a concise history of the Gospels and their authorship and kind of you know, their nature and where they come from and why they're not really reliable. But he's got a lot of really good videos on atheism and religion and philosophy. Really good stuff. So this is the first time I actually got to meet him. So this is you know, pretty interesting, pretty cool for all of us. But the reason that he hasn't been doing videos lately is because he has taken to blogging, and he has been blogging mostly on the topic of, surprise, feminism. He has some various reasons for going that route, which he may choose to explain. So I will go ahead and pass it over to you, Alex, if you want to further introduce yourself and kind of discuss your blog and maybe a little bit of controversy that you've run into with that.
All right, yes. So, hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on. This is Alex, or Venaloid, on YouTube and on my relatively new blog. And, yeah, so, of course, my blog, as you may know if you've already looked at it, pretty much is exclusively focused on the social justice kind of feminist stuff. And the reason for that is because, well, I should say, the reason I've not made many videos recently, not only because I've, you know, looking for a job as a senior in college and all that, but really the purpose of my channel has always been to kind of be a repository for thoughts I have. My brain just likes to chew on stuff. And for a long time it was, you know, religion and Christian stuff, and there still is some of that too. I still have those discussions with people on campus, and they're all very nice. But just more and more so, especially with my involvement with secular groups off the internet, the social justice feminism stuff has come up more and more frequently, and like it or not, that's what my brain has decided to chew on. But I really don't want to start uploading videos to YouTube that talk about this kind of stuff, because it's not really what my channel is about. People aren't really going to appreciate it, I don't think. And if I'm honest with myself, I really don't want another atheist YouTuber going off and saying, well, you know, I'm not really a feminist. Let me explain why. Not that it's like bad things to talk about. It's like, okay, there's enough of that. I get it. I feel like the market's kind of saturated. So that's the reason why I've not been making videos, but I have been blogging. And the tagline of my blog is the blog inspired by the YouTube channel, because it is still that kind of brain dump. But I don't really feel the motivation to make a full video out of it, because the reason I talked about, and you know, would still like to keep talking about religion, science, philosophy, is because I do have kind of an independent interest in that stuff, you know, independent of what Eric Hovind might say one day or another. And so that gives me the extra drive to sit down, make a video, get the lighting all right, which is kind of difficult sometimes. Whereas with this stuff, my really my only drive is that I think there's some crazy stuff being said, and I feel like I should address it. That's what my brain is chewing on, but I don't have that internal drive to go the extra mile and make a video out of it. So, yeah, there it is. I kind of justified my absence, as it were, I hope.
Yeah, so I'm glad that you kind of explained that. Now, as you stated, you kind of switched gears a little bit over to feminism. So obviously we're going to get into this, but maybe you could just briefly summarize kind of where you stand on this, and if you care to kind of mention, you know, you had a little bit of an issue, a controversy at your university where you were the president of the Secular Student Alliance, and that was related directly to your feminism blogging. So, you know, maybe just briefly mention that before we get into the discussion.
All right. Let's see. My blog might come off kind of one-sided, but I would say that where I am is I wouldn't call myself an MRA. I definitely wouldn't call myself a feminist. I would say I lean more toward the anti-feminist views. Not to say, like, I don't know, traditional, like women should be in the house, but like the feminist theory and all this stuff, I would tend to shy away from that. I would more easily call myself, you know, if I want to use the word feminist, I would call myself what is, I think, is called an individualist feminist, like Wendy McElroy calls herself, which is basically equality but without the ideological commitments to things like patriarchy and rape culture. And that's still assuming that I'm trying to use the word feminist to describe myself. I, as a matter of practice, just don't. Or Christina Hoff Sommers, of course, has her freedom feminism, she says, which is, yes, we should encourage women to get into STEM fields, but we should also recognize that maybe, just maybe, men and women kind of like different things, and we shouldn't be committed to this idea that it should be exactly 50-50 on everything. And again, if I were to call myself a feminist, which for various reasons, I think that's one of my first posts, I explained why I just don't. So yeah, it's kind of an awkward thing where I wouldn't really fit into, you know, one side, one camp or the other, because they do tend to be a little extreme if you've got a whole group set up for it. And yeah, sure, I can talk about the Secular Student Alliance stuff. Basically, I started writing this blog, and a few people complained. Apparently they knew my YouTube channel, and they must have gone to Google and typed in Venaloid, not YouTube. I don't know about you, but if I'm looking for someone's YouTube channel, I go to YouTube and type it in. But they found my blog, and some people didn't like it, and blah, 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 blah. They kicked me out as president. Now, what was really interesting about that, well, first of all, I kind of knew that was the underlying attitude to a lot of the officers, and I was kind of ready to leave anyway, honestly. Yeah, I know, you can't fire me, I quit, I'm right, you know. But it kind of was that, unfortunately, as juvenile as it may come across. And it was interesting is after I was, you know, removed, my Secular Student Alliance made a public internet Facebook announcement about it, saying why, and then seeing that, I was ready to let it drop and just walk away, but since they presented their side of the story, I posted back and I tagged them. I said, well, this is what I say happened. Here are the posts that people complained about. Judge for yourself if this was horrible. And most of the members who weighed in on those two Facebook posts actually ended up siding with me. Even this one guy who I initially met him, you know, he's very hardcore feminist, and I met him and I thought, like, oh God, this is someone I'm not going to get along with. He actually was the most upset that I was fired, surprisingly enough, because he is very adamant that these two things are different. You can be an atheist and not a feminist, or vice versa. You know, very much different from what P.Z. Myers would call dictionary atheists, where it's like, well, I just don't believe in God. No, and this is P.Z. Myers' position as I understand it, which is if you're an atheist, that brings with you certain other ideological commitments, one of which should be feminism. And, you know, this guy was very against that, and he was very supportive. I actually had to tell him, dude, I don't need you to be my attack dog. I was probably going to leave anyway, so I guess this kind of worked out for me, but I appreciate the support. So that was honestly just very interesting, but it's that same kind of thing where it's like you apparently can't be an atheist without also being a feminist now, and that's kind of one of the things that's driving me to at least write the blog, is that kind of, well, what I view as kind of a absurd mentality.
All right, thanks for giving us the lowdown on that. Yeah, the reason I asked you about that is because kind of the direction you want to take with this episode in discussing feminism, you bring up a couple of really good points. One is that feminism tends to be very divisive in the atheist community, you know, for reasons that you talk about. Some people say that, oh, if you're an atheist, you have to be a feminist. To me, that's more humanism. That's not because atheism isn't anything additional other than not believing in gods. And also the fact that sorry, let me gather myself here. So also that feminism, it's hard to define. Like you say, you don't choose to call yourself a feminist. I also tend to avoid the label, even though I am definitely for gender equality or equality among the sexes or whatever you want to call it. We understand that women are traditionally the underprivileged sex and that we're working to make them equal, but there's also situations where men also are unequal, and so we can work on behalf of men as well. And so this gets to be a very tenuous and controversial topic a lot of the times, and so that's kind of what we want to discuss. So, I just like to mention that basically what you would call like the textbook or the dictionary definition of feminism is just equal rights for both sexes. And like I alluded to there, the reason we call it feminism is because females are the underprivileged class in this case between men and women traditionally. So yeah, honestly, I don't have a firm stance on this, other than obviously I think both sexes are equal. So I'm kind of learning as I go here as well. It's a very complex issue. There's a lot of nuance, and it gets very heated. So a lot of the times it's very difficult to have a civil conversation with anyone about this. So I know there's going to be some differences opinions on the panel here tonight. So I just hope everybody can keep it civil and try to understand. We're all I know some of us have stronger feelings about this than others. But I am going to go ahead and kick it back over to Alis since he kind of MCs our show here, and he can kind of move the discussion along. I didn't know if he had any points to make or if he wanted to just kind of open it up to everybody to chime in. So Alis, what do you think?
Yeah, I hate to throw this right into the middle of the bridge that we were on to actually getting to the main topic, but we've got some new science this week. Yeah. So this week we have some scientists, or I think they were doctors, maybe, whatever. Scientists or doctors are scientists. Some doctors, anyway, not those pseudo-scientific doctors. Anyway, so basically they accidentally found a way to turn cancer cells into immune cells. So I'll do this screen share here. Let me know when you guys can see it. Cool. Scientists convert cancer cells into harmless immune cells. So basically here, from what little bit of reading I did on this, and I actually saw a news article on it earlier this week. I thought it was not a real news article because, I mean, that's kind of hard to believe that they found a way to convert cancer cells into immune cells. But basically, you can read this here, or you can just listen to me talk about it as usual. So basically, they threw everything they had at this aggressive cancer, and seemed like nothing was going to work. And then suddenly they noticed that what they were doing started to change the size and shape of the cancer cells into what resembled white blood cells. And so basically with this new science this week, we may be able to use this in the future to combat cancer. And note this area down here where it says the researchers also have reason to believe that these converted cells will not only be neutralized with regards to their former identity as a cancerous cell, but they may also help the body mount an immune response against other cancerous cells lingering in the body. This is huge to me. Like I said, I saw it earlier this week, and I thought that it was fake because, you see a lot of stuff on Facebook and stuff like that about people having these cancer cures, so I didn't really believe it. But then, I actually saw a paper on it. I'll put the link in the comments section, and then we've got the I Fucking Love Science link where they're talking about it. So it seems to be pretty legit. Let's talk about this. What do you guys think about this?
Well, I know Dieter in the comments here said that it's works only for a specific type of cancer. I would say that, yeah, it's really important to find that one specific type of cancer that we can do this to, because then we can see, kind of why this happens. We can look as to the reasons why it happens, and then we can change it for different cancer cells, different types of cancers, if that is even possible, depending on how it's actually changing the cells. So I think that it's still very important, even though it's just for one type of cancer. I think that it could potentially lead to a lot more valuable research.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is obviously very exciting, and like you said, this seems like science fiction. Doesn't seem like something that could actually happen. So yeah, I mean, at least for this type of cancer, that's pretty amazing that they were able to do this. And hopefully whatever pathway or mechanism that they determined that they could use this for this type of cancer, maybe that will be possible with some other types of cancer as well. Obviously there's so many different types of cancer, and we all just kind of put it under this big umbrella as like one single disease, but obviously they affect different types of cells and tissues and organs, and they don't all work the same way. You're dealing with different genes and all this and that and the other, but maybe there is some kind of pathway or mechanism here that might be analogous in other situations. But it's just, it's good to see regardless, even if it only is good for this one cancer, it's good to see that there is progress being made, and that our our research and our funding is paying off. And so, this will be very important for anybody who has this type of cancer in the future. That'll make it, readily treatable. So, very exciting stuff.
Yeah, I think this is a great thing, and I mean, obviously it's a great thing, right? But I think we could make a broader point about just sort of an attitude of discovery and scientific experimentation in general. The idea that scientists have to work as if they're atheists, right? Meaning specifically that if you want to attribute everything to a supernatural cause, you're not going to investigate it further, and it's very important in a progressive society, in a technologically advanced society, that we don't operate that way, whether we believe that or not, right? It also brings to mind the idea of playing God. I think there are probably a lot of people who would have been scared off by this type of research in the first place, had they been made aware of it. And that's a phrase that's thrown around all the time, is that scientists are playing God, and that's what we talk about with cloning and all sorts of stuff like that. But I think it's important to remember that that phrase doesn't really mean anything. It just means that we're experimenting with stuff that we don't understand, which, of course, is a huge foundational principle in science, right? And that's what leads to discoveries like this. So it's important for all of us to remember, regardless of our religious orientation or anything like that, that there are times, at least, and I think all of us on the panel here would argue that those times are always, but at least there are some times when it's more appropriate to live as if there's not a supernatural explanation for everything.
Well, actually that actually worked. Okay. So I was reading more about this because I saw the link on Facebook or something, but I was like, oh, neat, science is magic. Moving on to other things. But now I'm actually reading about it, and it seemed like this is like the most serendipitous sort of deal ever. In very layman's terms, so that I can understand it, the way that this actually happened was they bathed the particular type of cancer cells in like a stew of various growth factors, transcription factors, and various nutrients, and some of them just spontaneously morphed into white blood cells, and they're just like, oh, that's kind of neat, and like, wait a minute, let's see if we can go a different way with this instead of just ignoring it. And they remembered in some other experiment that if you give a certain kind of transcription factor to progenitor cells in mice, then it can have a very similar effect. So they're like, okay, let's just keep doing that. And it turned out that this worked, and they're able to make effectively a lot more white blood cells out of cancer that can go after the cancer. So you force cancer cells to become cannibals, which works for me. And it's definitely cool, and it definitely works in this very specific context. But the one reason I wanted to bring this up was this is one of those kind of deals that I absolutely love science, because they weren't trying to do this. They just were like, hey, this is a thing that's happening when we're literally throwing chemicals at cancer and seeing what happens. Because we're scientists and know what we're doing. And then it just kind of went in that something worked. They started investigating further, and now it works even better. Science is just fun sometimes.
If I can make an analogy to this situation that might really get some more layman people, I guess, to understand. Think of this as The Walking Dead. Okay, you've got this mysterious chemical that comes in and infects these certain cells, and then these cells turn on the other cells and eat those cells, and it's just like zombies. I mean, you got this hidden agent on The Walking Dead that comes in, turns people into zombies. Doesn't matter, if you get bit or not, because everybody's infected already, right? And so you've got the white blood cells that come in, and then they eat everybody else, and so it's just kind of like, that might not be a very good analogy, but it's what it got me thinking about it.
I thought that I did the layman's terms very well. Dieter attempted it, but it was still pretty bad because I'm sure most of our viewers have no idea what transcription codes are. I don't even know
who doesn't know what
okay?
progenitor cells and transcription factors are? I mean, let's be real.
Okay, but on the serious note here, we mentioned in the chat that this is for specifically leukemia. I just wanted to note, especially to Dieter, that a lot of things that we figure out and discover in science do happen to be accidents. That doesn't take away from the title of being a scientist. It just means that we're people out here that are trying to fix things, change the world, discover things, and sometimes what we do is an accident, but if you didn't take that initial step towards it, you wouldn't probably get there. It's also important to note that this discovery is really important because, as far as I know, it's still 20,000 people that die every day of cancer, and I think that it's once every 10 minutes someone dies of a blood cancer. So the leukemia-type cancers, I know it can deal with bone marrow and other things like that. It's not always a blood cancer, but if you save one life, is that enough? Yes, it is. So, with that being said, we're going to go ahead and move on into the main topic here, which is feminism. Raise your hands if you use the title feminist to describe you. Okay, so I guess I'll go ahead and go first really quickly. I've described myself. I've called myself a feminist long before I was an atheist. And I always held to that standard textbook definition of feminism, which is to simply make men and women equal in all factors, economically, all that good stuff. So that's how I always consider myself a feminist. And the reason, like Brendan mentioned earlier, that we call it feminism and not men's rights activism is because historically women have always been the underhanded group. And so I know we've got some people that were asking on Facebook and in the comment section of the chat, like, what has modern feminism done to help our world? And so hopefully we're going to be able to talk about that tonight. So, being a feminist, this is important to note here. I wanted to make this clear that, first of all, radical feminists cannot speak for the whole group. It's just like, radical terrorists, radical Muslims, and all this other nonsense. But I did want to also touch on something that Brendan mentioned, which was that he wouldn't call himself a feminist, even though he believes in the equality of the genders. So yeah, here we go, right out the bat, right out the gate. Here we go. We're getting ready to cause some dissension. But this goes back to the same thing, and like how I feel about Neil deGrasse Tyson, like refusing to call himself an atheist. It's intellectual dishonesty. Not you, Brendan, but for him, it definitely is. And we can draw a parallel here to the whole feminism thing. Just because there are a group of radical feminists giving feminism a bad name, does that mean we shouldn't call ourselves feminists? And so, before I talk you guys' heads off and ramble on about everything under the feminist sun, I'll turn it over to whoever wants to go. The feminist son. Come on.
My hand. Okay, so I guess I'll start us off because, of course, I will. Uh, I wanted to cover a few things before I actually read a thing I actually prepared for this, which is so unlike me. So there's a thing that has to do with like radical versions of a religion that I love the phrase. It's like if those who hold to the ideas most closely are assholes, it definitely says something about the movement itself. When it comes to a religion, it says something bad about the religion itself if those who... Yeah, you get the point. So if radical feminists are assholes, then that, to me, says something about the movement as a whole. Or at least the direction in which the movement is going. But that's a different thing, so let me actually read this thing that I wrote. As far as feminism in general, my opinion is I'm suspicious of it. I'm suspicious of feminism for very similar reasons that I'm suspicious of religion. They both make dubious claims about reality that often do not stand up to evidence. They both use manipulative tactics such as bait and switching. Oh, you are for equality when that means you must be a feminist. Oh, now that you're a feminist, you also have to believe in all these things. And it's like, not really. Intense shaming to those who are not a feminist, especially if those are women. That is actually quite frequent, that if you go on any blogs or anywhere on the internet, and a woman says, you know what, I'm not actually a feminist, they get rape threats from other women who consider themselves feminists, and men that consider themselves feminists. Almost seeing that if you're not a feminist, you deserve to be harmed in some way. There's also a very high level of hypocritical standards. I cite the Shirtgate. You all know what I'm talking about? They are hyper-exclusive. Basically, you must adhere to a strict dogma, rape culture, patriarchy, etc., and it does not encourage criticism of any of these ideas. I've been told to my face, through Facebook, that questioning claims made by feminists hurts the feminist movement. So, don't really know what to do with that. They gain supporters primarily through fear, shame, and self-entitlement. That's been my personal experience of it. People are free to disagree with that. But that seems to be how most of their followers get gained, is either by telling them if they're not, then they should be ashamed of themselves. There's an internalized guilt trip that a lot of people go through. And it's just an enormous, I am a woman, therefore I'm special. That happens quite a lot. It's nearly impossible to define. We kind of went through that earlier. I've heard so many definitions for feminism that it's just ridiculous. One of the primary issues that I have with even the dictionary definition is that it actually has the predisposition that women are lower than men currently. That's basically in the definition. So I don't know how feminism could ever be solved when its definition includes that you should assume women are lower. Anyway, constant use of past accomplishments to justify present actions or bad behavior. We went into a little bit of that. Both religion and feminism claim to be a be-all, end-all solution to all life's problems, even though they focus on a very specific subset of information. And I guess that's mostly it. For these reasons, I am very suspicious about modern feminism, and I happily do not associate myself with the movement, as it has moved far away from its once noble and needed ancestry. I consider myself an egalitarian, which basically, in its definition, does not preclude anybody. It does not claim to be a solution for anything. It's more of just an outlook of how one views the world. Just, oh, someone's being harmed or discriminated against. Guess we should do something about that. So it seems to be a much better word. And a constant question I have for feminists is if egalitarianism has the exact same stated goals as feminism, but also includes everyone else, why not just be an egalitarian? What is so important about the word feminism? But my biggest question to all feminists, and I'm going to cut this out of this video and make it my own video, so that's why I'm doing all this right now. What there's an idea of rights between men and women, and we're trying to strive for the equality between those rights. What rights do men have that women do not? Still waiting for that one to actually be answered. I'm done.
Okay. Well, as you guys predicted in the chat here, I would love the opportunity to respond. And I've given this a lot of thought. I came to this topic much like Dieter, more prepared than I usually am. So I think I didn't write anything though. So bravo, kudos to you, Dieter. You have bested me in that regard. So here's where I think that Dieter and sort of if he can be used as a representative of a non-feminist, where he and somebody like myself, who is a feminist, disagree. We do absolutely want the same end goals, right? We want everybody to be similarly advantaged. We want nobody to be taken advantage of and things like that. I think where we disagree is in the idea that there are not currently disadvantages that necessitate feminism. And that's really the core of feminism. If everybody were equal, then feminism would absolutely be completely unnecessary, and I would completely agree with you, and egalitarianism all the way, right? But currently, we don't have that level playing field yet. And I don't just make that claim out of thin air. So I have some statistics here that I was able to find. Every statistic that I have listed here is true of the United States, and it's later than the year 2000, right? So, because I wanted to make sure that things were current, so we weren't talking about 60s stereotyping or anything like that. Okay, so here is what I have. So in the United States, 14% of people in the United States believe that, or in a particular survey, right? So maybe not all of these things are entirely representative, but I think they're representative enough. So 14% of people surveyed believe that if jobs are scarce, men should have the advantage in job hunting, that jobs should be preferentially given to men if jobs are scarce, right? 14% of people in the United States. 39% of people in the United States say that men have better lives. That's 32% of women, or 32% of men and 45% of women claim that. 25% say that a relationship in which the male is the primary provider is preferable to one in which both partners equally provide. 25% of people believe that. 15% of people in the United States say that college education is more important for males than it is for females. 68% of people in the United States say that men have more well-paid job opportunities than do women. In this particular survey, 19% of men completely agreed with the sentiment, 33% of women completely agreed. 25% of people in the United States in 2007 did not disagree that women should return to their traditional roles in society. That is, in 2007, 25% of people did not object to the claim that women should return to their traditional roles. 25%. That seems huge to me. 59% of millennial women, this is women born the year 1980 or later, 59% of women say that having kids makes career advancement more difficult, whereas only 19% of men say the same thing, which would seem to indicate some inequality there. 71% of female college graduates say it's easier for a man to get a top executive job in business and or government. 71%. 42% of mothers have had to reduce work hours to care for their children or another family member, as opposed to 28% of men. 42% of women, 28% of men. 39% of women have taken significant time off to care for children or family, as opposed to 24% of men. 27% of women have had to quit a job, as opposed to 10% of men. And here is one that I find kind of interesting. Only 13% of women have had to turn down a promotion to take care of children or family, compared to 10% of men. I think that's interesting because it seems like it could indicate, and doesn't necessarily indicate, but could indicate that men are up for promotions much more frequently than women, and women don't get that many opportunities to move up. 69% of arrests in the sex crime arena, in prostitution and, what was the term, commercialized vice, between the years of 1990 and 2010, 69% of arrests were of women, despite the fact that most Johns as they're termed, people partaking in prostitution are in fact men, as are most pimps. At least as far as we can tell, because it's difficult to get good statistics on it. So I think those statistics are pretty interesting. I think they do indicate that we still have some inequality here in the United States that needs to be addressed. There are different ways that men and women are perceived, and as a result, they're given different opportunities and different paths in life. Yes, maybe women women are assumed to be better at taking care of children. They're assumed to be more compassionate and stuff like that. But that doesn't get them better jobs. It doesn't get them, the higher paying jobs that so many of them want. For instance, I'm a stay-at-home dad right now and a freelance writer, right? So, but I do not bring home the primary income in my family. My wife does that. When we made this decision, we had to make a very conscious decision, and this has been to the dismay of some members in our families and things like that, some of our friends, stuff like that. We had to make a very conscious decision that we were going to switch those gender roles, right? I am the stay-at-home person, and my wife is the provider, and that's not how things are expected to be. The fact that there is an expectation at all, I think, is problematic, right? We need to start breaking down these gender role barriers. So, yeah, ultimately, I think that there are still reasons that feminism is, in fact, necessary. I will respond quickly to some of the points that Dieter brought up. So what rights do men have question, I think, is a valid one and is definitely one that should be examined. I think that some of these statistics hopefully speak to that, but, maybe not. Let's see, why not be egalitarian? I think egalitarianism is great, but I think it fails to recognize the fact that there is a class of our society in regard to sex and gender that is disadvantaged under the other. I think that's a truth, and that's why I call myself a feminist rather than an egalitarian. If things were equal, if we were starting from a level playing field, absolutely, let's be egalitarian. But we're not. And as for radicals being representative of the movement in general, I think you made a good point in that radicals are only representative if they're the ones holding most fastly to the tenets of the movement itself. In feminism, I don't think it's clear that that's the case. Yes, there are feminists that say some crazy things. There are feminists that believe some crazy things. I don't think there's any reason to believe that the feminists who say crazy things are the ones who are most closely adhering to the tenets of feminism. I don't think any of us would argue that, except for themselves. So yes, I think that's it. So there's my spiel, and feel free to respond away, good friends.
I know Dieter wants to go, but I'd like to jump in here real quick and respond to Chad here. Well, I think the mere fact that they are considered radicals in their own group kind of puts them in the minority. Because I mean, I think that if it was shifted around with the majority being what we consider radicals now, I think that they would be the status quo, and then the other group would be, considered radical. So I mean, the mere fact that they are radicals kind of indicates that they are not the, I guess, majority, or maybe not what the original intent of the movement or whatnot is supposed to be about. And as far as the egalitarian part of it, I mean, I kind of side with egalitarianism. I also consider myself a feminist. I mean, I even took Anita Sarkeesian's feminist test that she put out there, and I just I don't know. At first, I was thinking that feminism was more about unbalanced position for females in the community, but then I really came to realize that there are a lot of different definitions used by a plethora of different feminists. Like you have feminists that are very sex positive out there that really really fight for the right of women to be able to express themselves sexually without being deemed like immoral or bad or anything like that. And then you've also got another group out there that's pretty much working against that idea, trying to restrict the sexuality of women to what they want. At least that's what it seems to me. It just seems like there's a lot of different groups that are that have different different preconceptions about their own movement and are working towards their own independent goals. But the problem is that those independent goals seem to be a vicious cycle that keeps eating in on itself, because you've got the group of feminists that fight for sex positivity, and then that comes into conflict with the feminists that are kind of fighting that. So I label myself as a feminist, but I label it under the definition of fighting for equal rights in general. I've actually heard that definition. So if that's what feminism means to you, then yes, I am a feminist. But if feminism means showing preferential treatment to women or whatever, if that's feminism to you, then no, I'm not your kind of feminist. I say egalitarian really kind of hits home for me, or humanism, because I really seek a balanced scale, and if there's an imbalance somewhere, then that means that the weights have to be shifted. And I definitely agree that there is different opportunities for women. They get paid less than their male counterparts. That's showable by just data. And I think that we're moving in a positive direction on that front. I think we really are. I am very much of the opinion that we need to let people decide for themselves what they want to do. We don't need to push like the STEM fields on women. We don't need to push any certain field on women. We have to reverse this historical, I guess, knowledge that women are lesser than men, and a lot of people now still have those feelings. I live in North Alabama. A lot of people still have those feelings. So I think that I would label myself as a feminist, as an egalitarian, as a humanist, anything that you really want to label me, I guess, as long as it gets down to the core of the principle, and that's providing equality across the gender divide, I guess.
All right. I will just go ahead and reiterate that I do consider myself a feminist, although I choose not to wear that label specifically. And there's something I really like is a quote from the comedian Aziz Ansari, and I'll just go ahead and quote from him. So he says, "If you believe that men and women have equal rights, and then someone asks you if you're a feminist, you have to say yes, because that's how words work. You can't be like, yeah, I'm a doctor who primarily does diseases of the skin." And then someone says, "Oh, you're a dermatologist?" And then you're like, "No, that's way too aggressive of a word. I'm not a dermatologist at all." So, by that measure, I certainly am a feminist. But I have my reasons for not wearing that word, for that label. And a big part of it is, I'll just give you my personal perception of feminism, okay? This is just how I see feminism presented, most of the time, whether it's right or wrong. So I see feminism as the extreme feminist. I see, shirtless women running around, yelling and screaming. I see people getting overly sensitive at men trying to flirt with women, saying that it's sexual harassment and things of that nature. I see people like Anita Sarkeesian trying to say that, there's male tropes or female tropes in video games that are sexist, and to an extent that's correct, but she goes way, it's hyperbolic what she does with it. So that's my perception of feminism and why I choose not to wear the label. But I'm also not an activist in this area. I'm very active in speaking out against religion as an atheist, as an anti-theist. So even though there are negative connotations to the label atheist, I choose to wear that label because I feel comfortable enough in that I know enough about the topic and the subject matter that I'm trying to take back the word, basically, and take back the label and turn around that perception, okay? So that's why I feel comfortable there, because that's where my activism is. I certainly would call myself an egalitarian or a humanist with respect to either atheism or feminism. But if you're actually doing activism within a certain realm, you probably want a more identifying label. But that's just why I choose not to wear it. And in that respect, I can understand why people like Bill Nye and Neil deGrasse Tyson choose not to call themselves atheists, because they're more about educating people. They're more about science and getting people to understand science. And I think that they probably feel that if they can help people learn and understand science, that will get them to the eventual goal of, you know, questioning religion, questioning gods, maybe coming around to that line of thinking. So I can't appreciate why they choose not to own that label, even though they very much are atheists, you know, in the same way that I am a feminist but choose not to wear the label. Now, you know, also within the feminist movement, I tend to see a lot of discord. It's just, you know, if you go like the Wikipedia page on like feminism, and I know it's probably edited and re-edited, and people are trying to change it all the time. But if you try to do any research onto these, there's so many different. It's like Christianity, you know. There's like 40,000 different denominations of feminism, and trying to put them all under one umbrella is really useless. Really, I mean, it's just they even many of them even conflict with each other on a lot of things. You know, you have we mentioned Shirtgate. Dieter mentioned Shirtgate a little bit earlier, and that was where one of the scientists was helping to land the probe onto the comet back a few months ago. Was doing interviews, and he's wearing the shirt that had scantily clad women on it. And in fact, it was actually designed by his friend, who was actually a woman. But you had all these feminists out there saying that his shirt was sexist and inappropriate and things of this nature. But you know, that's the thing, is like you have feminists that fight for women for the right to be able to wear whatever they want, and they shouldn't be shamed for it, or they shouldn't be saying that they deserve to be raped for it or anything like that. You know, you have this, you know, this string within within feminism that says that women are sexually liberated, they can do whatever they want. They say, hey, if women want to do pornography, that's their decision. They should be able to do that. And then you have this other side of feminism that says that these women are being exploited and that this is wrong and we shouldn't be doing this. So, you know, there's a lot of discord. There's a lot of, you know, mixed messages that you get when you put everything under the umbrella of this one word. A couple weeks back, we did an episode on women in atheism, kind of questioning why there aren't as many women as men that are outspoken about atheism. And you know, some of the comments after that, when I posted my section of the video, I got some comments from some what I consider radical feminists. And they were, I mean, one of them basically told me that the only reason that I wanted more women in in atheism was so that I can get in their pants. And I took great offense to that, because that's not it at all. I just want our community to be as diverse and as inclusive as possible, because, you know, obviously I think atheism is skewed a little bit more towards men, but it's not this giant gap where, you know, we shouldn't have that many women involved. So to say that the only reason I want women involved in atheism is for that reason is completely absurd, and I fought back against that pretty strongly. But you know, I think that, you know, it's just, there's so many ways you can go with this. Basically, what Chad was talking about, he brought up all these statistics, you know, that kind of shed light on why women, at least the perception is there. Are all those stats that he was talking about actually, you know, reflective of reality? I'm sure at least some of them are. So it's interesting to look into. But you know, it's one thing, because we're in a pretty egalitarian society here in the United States, and women have come a long, long way with respect to equality. So, you know, when people say, what has modern feminism done for us lately? Well, it seems like not much, right? Because it seems like they've accomplished most of their goals. But we also have to look more broadly. We have to look at the entire global community. There's women still being horribly oppressed in a lot of other countries. So even if there is not a whole lot to be done, you know, in more developed nations, Western nations, I think there still is some to be done. But also for men as well, you know, I think there's some inequality on the men's side as well. But, you know, we also have to fight this globally, so there might be a lot of feminist activists that are working on that as well. So we have to keep that in mind and keep that, you know, kind of perspective there. So before I turn it over to Venaloid to give his opinions and things on this, so I do want to just bring up, you know, some of the things that often get discussed with, you know, oh, hey, men are unequal in these areas too. So something we were discussing the other day amongst ourselves was that, I'm going on Dieter's word on this. So he says that at least in some states, I don't know if it's you know, the entire United States, at least in some states, it isn't considered rape of a man if a woman forces herself onto him. The only way that it's considered rape is if a man is penetrated in some way. But if a woman actually forces herself onto a man, that's not considered rape. If that's the case, we need to fix that, because that's a problem. Another thing is like the selective service. You know, all men 18 years of age have to register for selective service, where women aren't required to do that. Also, paternity leave. I'm lucky enough to work for a company that gives me paternity leave when I have a child, when my wife has a child, but that's certainly not universal by any measure. And we understand that the woman does have the child that actually gives birth, and she has physical trauma and needs to recover and things of that nature. But it's only fair that the man gets to spend some time with his children after the birth as well. And I also understand too that there are situations, just because of biology and just the nature of things, because we are two different sexes, we do have differences. There are going to be some things that aren't entirely equal, and I think one example of that is like abortion rights, where a woman has complete control over that decision, and then a big point of contention a lot of the time is child support, where the women can decide to keep the child even if the man doesn't want to, and then the man has to pay child support. So those are all some examples. So I think I said my piece. I will pass it over to Alex for his commentary at this point.
All right, well, there's obviously a lot to cover. I did my best to take some notes on the fly. So, oh man, I'm going to do my best on this and start with the things that Chad said. 3 main points, I believe, fill me in if I was wrong, but there's the dictionary definition of feminism he mentioned, examples of modern women's issues, and, of course, radicals. So one of my very first blog posts was on why I'm not a feminist, that kind of thing. And the thing that I mentioned, I think this is key, is that by the dictionary definition of feminism, that is the belief that men and women should have equal opportunities and be roughly treated equally as best we can, under that definition of feminism, sure, I am a feminist, and that is a pretty simple case to make. However, in practice, I am not accepted by the feminist community because I don't accept the validity or the explanatory power of feminist theories such as patriarchy, rape culture, and all these other things. And so while by the dictionary definition I would have no problem saying, oh, sure, I'm a feminist, in practice, that really does not work out. In practice, that is to say, the definition of feminism is different from that you'd find in the dictionary. So, and that's kind of my reason I don't call myself a feminist, which is if I tell that to someone on the street, they're not going to say, oh, you believe in equality. Okay, they might, it depends, but they might more easily associate me with the patriarchy, rape culture kind of people, who, I guess this would be a good transition into radicals, even though that was the last thing mentioned. It seems that, yes, obviously there's something to be said about the fact that they're called radicals does kind of give you an idea of their position within the movement itself. However, as with a lot of radicals, they do seem to have the loudest voices and have the most power to affect change. And to some extent, it does seem that when I read pieces by radical feminists, that their opinions are very much they're very much in line with very, I don't know, nitty-gritty feminist theory about patriarchy, that's a system that all men unconsciously participate in, rape culture is male entitlement to female bodies, and that's why we need to do this or that. Someone even argued that circumcision reduces patriarchal instincts or something like that. And it does seem that they are rather in line with what seems to be prevailing feminist theory. So make of that what you will. I'm not entirely sure what that adds. And then, of course, there were examples of modern women's issues. And something I did notice, though, is that a lot of the issues that Chad mentioned a lot of the first ones anyway, like the first half of it, had to do with what people believed about the world, not necessarily how the world actually is. Like, I may believe, okay, I can't come up with an example, but the fact that a group of people is under the impression of something doesn't necessarily mean that it's an issue. One example might be the idea that women are significantly less safe walking home at night, which may be the case, although I've seen, that's easy to believe, obviously, but I've seen other reports that show that men are actually more likely to be victims of violent crime, even though women do have a local spike with sexual assaults, of course. But if you surveyed women and said, hey, do you feel safe walking at night? Well, they'd say no, of course. Men would say, yes, I do feel safe, but that's, of course, I would say because women are told that they're not safe, even if they themselves have never had that happen to them. So that's just the difference between perception and reality. Other things I would mention, kind of like Prototype mentioned, were things like the draft. In order to have certain legal rights, you need, like the right to vote even, you need to register for the draft, which, granted, hasn't happened in a long time, but it happened as late as recently as Vietnam, so even that, it's like, okay, well, basically, so in order to vote, I have to sign a contract that says I agree to die for my country. And it was interesting, which is during the women's suffrage movement, a fair number of women did not want the right to vote because they were worried that they would have to sign up for selective service and have these other obligations. And so, of course, eventually women got the vote, even though they didn't have any of the obligations that the men did, which, granted, I'm not worried that there's going to be a draft, although I guess there could be, but it is a very clear, fixable legal thing that could be fixed to make men more equal with women. Whereas things like social perception, I don't think are, well, shall we say, as big of an issue. Like, you could make the same argument about men. Oh, men are seen as child predators and rapists. Men, no one cares if men are suffering. Men are expected to provide for others. Then there's, of course, like stereotypes that men are slobs, they're unclean, men are dumb. Like, look at any sitcom. It's classically the Homer Simpson is the dumb man father. Marge Simpson is the responsible mother. I mean, you could make that argument. I'm not sitting here trying to make that argument. This is why we need the MRAs. But if you're talking about rights and oppression kind of thing, I think it would be a little more of a better thing to focus on, so to speak, is the hard and fast legal rights that men or women may or may not have. And things like social perception should come later. So there's that, and there's more to be said on that, of course. Let's see. When John was speaking, he mentioned different groups within feminism, and one of the things I've noticed that I very much like about Christianity is that Catholics will say, oh yeah, there's the Pentecostals over there, the Episcopalians over there, the Baptists over there, but they understand that they are all Christians in a sense. They've all followed Jesus at some basic level, but they're comfortable with the idea of saying, well, those are a different kind of Christians, those are a different kind of Christians, those are also another kind, we are our kind. But with feminism, I kind of wish that there was that same sort of comfort in distinction. Christina Hoff Sommers has tried to coin different types of feminism, like gender feminism is the like the modern social justice kind of stuff, and her feminism she calls freedom feminism. But really, those labels haven't caught on. And what I usually find is that when I talk about these feminists doing this, other feminists will say, well, I'm not like that. It's like, okay, well then, I'm sorry, they're those feminists over there. They don't have a name. That's the best I can do. If you want to call them gender feminists, if you want to call these freedom feminists, that would help me a lot, honestly, because otherwise you're just going to get people saying, it's like, well, that's not me. It's like, oh, I wasn't talking to you, and it's all this weird label stuff that I wish was a little more simple. Yeah, that's pretty much the extent of the notes I've taken if someone wants to respond.
There is something that I wanted to mention here is that okay, since we're talking about these different labels and groups and subgroups of feminists, there is a couple things that we need to talk about. And Dieter mentioned something in the chat there about feminism being the advocacy of women's rights on the grounds of political, social, and economic equality to men. So if men are lower than women in different aspects, they must be lowered. No. They must not be lowered. But this is where the flip side of feminism comes in, where if you know that men are disadvantaged in a certain area, then you are supposed to be working towards that equality. The same thing if men had been disadvantaged for thousands of years and, feminism, modern feminism was actually called men's rights activism, and we noticed that women were at a disadvantage in some area, we should be working to fix that. And, I can definitely draw many parallels with this where I've seen good men like my father and grandfather attempt to get custody through the court system of their kids when the mother was unfit. And it was hell. I witnessed it personally with my father. It was hell for him to go through to attempt to defeat the court system when he had all his ducks in a row. My mother was unfit and on drugs and all these other things. And this is what I'm mentioning here, is that it is the responsibility of feminists when you realize that men are at a disadvantage in one of these political, social, or economic areas to fix that, to repair that. And no matter what you call the title, whether you want to call it egalitarian or feminist, they're still responsible. And I think that because I label myself a feminist, I think that there's a lot of wasted time. As with most things, why are you out there like wasting time taking off your shirt and saying, "Oh, let's free the nipple" and things like that? To me, that's a waste of time. Like, we have greater issues to work on. Like an example I just gave you, like the court system. Like, I'm sure that there are many great fathers out there that would be more responsible and more of a parent to a child than the mother. And yet, the way the system is designed, we want to give the kids to the mother no matter what. Just like the selective service, you know, I think, it was just in the past couple years what women can serve on the front line now. Like, that was major. That was a big thing. And I think that women should be drafted as well. It's not either that or you got to take away the draft, which is not going to happen. So women need to be drafted as well. And that's the thing. Like, that's what I'm saying by being a feminist. It's not just, oh, all of the women's issues need to be recognized. It's that, hey, let's fix these issues, but while we're at it, we've also got these other things in areas where men are disadvantaged, and it needs to be corrected.
You're basically defining egalitarianism. So I don't know. This is you brought up like 3 things that I brought up in the beginning, like using the historical successes of feminism, that women were definitely historically disadvantaged when compared to men, and using that as a justification to be like, that's why we still need feminism. It's like, no, feminism worked. The equality of rights with women happened.
Yes,
Good.
here in the United
it was
States,
a success.
but let's
That's a
not
good thing.
forget about the rest of the world. It's not a worldwide thing yet, Dieter, and I think that you're failing
And now
to realize
now you're doing a bait and switch. That wasn't what we're talking about. It's in this country. Other countries need the first 2 waves still.
Yeah, and I think this is something that I tried to highlight in my initial little foray into the topic, is that, yeah, we do want the same things, and I think I didn't disagree with anything that Ayola said. I think the draft thing is nonsense. The the child custody thing is nonsense. Absolutely, we are 100% on the same page about that. The difference is that feminists generally, I guess I could say always, probably, it kind of probably has to be a part of the definition, but feminists claim that women are still disadvantaged, and egalitarians, is the term that you've been using, don't recognize that claim as true. And I think that's...
No, yes, they do. This is the problem why I'm so annoyed by this, is yes, it does. In any circumstance where anyone is disadvantaged for any reason, it falls under the purview of being an egalitarian, that those issues should be addressed. Nowhere have I ever said that there aren't individual things that women would be, as a group, disadvantaged when compared to men. I guess only men, because there aren't really other groups in this dichotomy.
Right, yeah.
I guess intergendered people, but they have way more issues.
Right, sure. Well, then,
anyway,
really, I guess, yeah, so, really, I guess
those things exist. It's just they're social things. They're like things that are worth having a conversation about. Like, it's worth changing the zeitgeist of how our country views women. That's a useful thing for feminism to be. But that's never the only claim.
Well, see,
it's always things like patriarchy or rape culture or, like, forgive me, Chad, but completely misusing statistics.
All right.
Because even in the ones that you gave, you said like 14% of people think that, I forget which one the 14% was, that women should still be in the home or something like that. That means that like 86% disagree.
Yes, absolutely. And
so
you're
the
totally
vast
right
majority disagree.
Yes, and I will not deny that great progress has been made, especially, in the past 30 years, the past 40 years. Absolutely,
there will
you're entirely
be 100%.
Right.
There are people that still think slavery should come back.
Right.
There's never going to be 100%.
Yeah, here's the thing, though, is that when it comes to claims like, and in the same sources that I was using for the statistics that I quoted, it said things like 97% of people, when you just address them with the claim, women should have equal rights to men, 97% of people in the United States say yes, that is absolutely true, and that's great. That's awesome.
Yeah,
similarly,
that's the thing that Alex went over, was also that these are just public perceptions.
Right.
Sure.
Yes.
If the feminist movement was just about public perception, then cool. The
Okay,
men's
so
rights
then-
group will talk about how commercials are screwing over dudes. Feminists will talk about how video games are screwing over women. If that
Yeah,
was
so
what
that
it was
brings
for,
me
then
to-
neat.
Yeah,
But
so
there are
that,
more
that brings me
claims
to my
being
further
made.
point. Yes, it does. There are more claims being made, and that brings me to my further point, which is that social perception is not something that simply exists in a vacuum, right? If you ask people in the United States, should black people have equal rights to white people, 97% of them are probably going to say yes. However, black men are categorically being gunned down by police. You know what I mean? Like, there's not social
That's not
perception
even true.
leads to action. Social
Look,
perception
this is-
absolutely leads to action, and this is the problem, and this is why the social
No,
perception is very important.
No, this is the problem. And this is the problem with the sensationalistic like news cycle that we have. If you actually look up the statistics that matter, like things that are like statistics of events that happen that are written down by reliable sources, then even the gunned down thing, like more white people are gunned down than black people in this country, according to the FBI.
Well,
It's
that has
just
a lot
that
to. I
no
mean, you
one
have to
cares.
differentiate. You have to differentiate between total number and percentage. But I think
No,
we're
I
getting off on
understand that.
Right,
But
right.
Let me finish.
Okay, go ahead.
So
enough.
I totally get that, and there could be an argument being made that it's just proportionately that black folk are disproportionately killed. But if you want to say that it's like vast numbers of black people are being mowed down as opposed to white people, that's not true. And that's just because that doesn't follow the narrative. So that's a different subject, and I can be completely wrong, and there could be definite racism happening, which I do not doubt that there's definite racism happening.
Yeah, let's just set that one aside for a second. But like, as a tangent to that.
Let me finish my damn thought.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm relating that to the same kind of sensationalism and fear-mongering that comes from the feminist movement. Like Alex kind of mentioned it offhandedly, but it's like men are more likely to be violently assaulted on the street than women are likely to be like sexually assaulted on the street, like vastly more likely. But no one talks about that because that is not where the sensationalism comes in.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I was just gonna kind of make an analogy here. So, you know, in the same way that we aren't a post-racial society just because African Americans have achieved equal rights in pretty much all respects, that doesn't mean that, you know, we're a post-misogynistic society right now. Just, you know, so basically, even if feminism has achieved all of its major goals and there's not really much, you know, as far as actual rights, I mean, there might be perceptions out there, there might be things that are still a little unequal out there, but, you know, I think that a lot of what this boils down to, a lot of this discussion and disagreement boils down to is unfortunately labels, you know, defining terms, and then also, you know, is feminism still needed in like in the United States? Basically, obviously, we've talked about, you know, other nations, third world countries, things of that nature, but, you know, is it still really needed in the United States? And even if it's not, you know, it doesn't mean that we're a post-misogynistic society or that there's not still, you know, I don't know if you want to say animus or just discrimination against women out there. But I liken it to, you know, like affirmative action. There was a time and a place for that, in my opinion, and it was to help minorities, you know, African Americans, from their disadvantaged position that they held for so long to get back into society. I actually did a video on this last year when the Supreme Court ruled on the affirmative action case in Michigan, and I actually explained how, you know, even though I felt like affirmative action had a time and a place, I felt like that time and a place had kind of gone by, and now we're kind of past that point. We've kind of had a few generations to be able to help lift them up back to, you know, give them a leg up, and they should be able to now be on a level playing field, you know, after having been given that help. We shouldn't be taking opportunities away from other groups in order to favor African Americans at this point. You know, I think at one point that was needed. I think we're past that. So in the same way, I don't think, you know, we should get to the point where we're giving women opportunities that they don't really deserve just because we want to make things equal. So what I'm saying is, like, if we still have, you know, men that are dominant in a certain field, or maybe there's more male CEOs, or whatever the case may be, and I'm just throwing out random examples here, but, you know, just because it's not a 50-50 split, that doesn't mean that it's misogynistic or that there's still work to be done, you know? I think that just claiming that everything needs to be equal 50-50 split is going too far. I think that it has to come down to a point where you have to earn it, where it has to be deserved. Okay, and I think that's basically the crux of the issue here. Have we come far enough? Has enough been done where we're at that point, or does more need to be done? And, you know, like I said, I'm still learning on this issue. I'm still, you know, kind of on the fence in a way. So I can't answer that question personally. I don't know if any of you feel comfortable answering that question, if we've come far enough yet. But I think that's the crux of the issue when it comes down to it.
If feminism is defined by a rights issue, then I think we've reached it. So if feminism became, like, I'm not saying nothing but, because obviously social movements are important regardless, but if it became just a social movement of, like, raising our consciousness of, like, sexist language or sexist tropes, or just talking about issues that women disproportionately deal with, then cool. Then there's a men's side that also does that. Like, that would be fine. The issue comes in when they're, like, claims about reality that don't stack up to evidence, and then, like, rights issues that don't exist anymore.
So
I'm
I just
with
think
you on that. I think that it's been hijacked. I think that, okay, so if we're talking about here in the United States, then for, you know, for the sake of saving us some time, then yes, feminism has been successful here in the United States. Now, some people can make the argument that there's these little nitpicky things, but okay, but as I would guess that most of us here are humanist, what would happen if we were 100% humanists here in the United States and we solved all our human rights problems? You know, there was no human trafficking, none of that nonsense going on. Does that mean that we need to put an end to humanism now just because we've solved it here in the United States? And this is not a bait and switch. This is the reality that in other places women still don't have the right to vote. Women still don't have the right to express themselves. They don't have the very same freedoms. And my argument is that the feminists that are here have hijacked the term, and they've turned it into something that is generally negative, and they are not using it in the proper way. So while I call myself a feminist, I do not relate at all to what these modern radical feminists are into. So I'm actually more concerned with, like, hey, why are, you know, 11 million women being human trafficked into the state of Maryland? Like, why is that going on? Rather than, oh, I want to free the nipple. Like, I'm not saying that, you know, it's less of a thing, you know, women should be able to show their chest or whatever. What I'm saying is the human trafficking of women is a more serious issue to me. And that's what I think modern feminism has went wrong. It's like this sensationalized thing where you have these radical feminists who try to tell you what feminism actually is. And what can we do about that? We do the same thing that we have to do with atheism. Atheism has all this negative baggage attached to it from centuries of religious, you know, delusion, basically, about what atheists actually are. How do we fix that? We show what atheists actually are. So how do we fix the feminist issue where feminism has been hijacked by radicals? That's really where we're at with this.
Well, as far as you know, what you're saying here, you know, how do we kind of change it to where it's more of a positive feminism rather than the radical feminism? I think that with any group, you know, if you want to change the tide of a movement, you have to be willing to speak out. So, like, for instance, with the Shirtgate situation, you know, we needed more women that are actually in STEM fields to highlight the actual problems with the STEM field as far as women are concerned. I have a friend who was handing in a report, and the guy that was over the project wouldn't take the report, but she gave the exact report to a colleague, a male colleague. He handed it in. He accepted it, no questions asked. It's things like that. It's things like, you know, male supervisors that are segregating women out into their own, groups or whatnot at work, instead of, bringing them into the team effort and really making them feel a part of the team. Those are the kind of things, the kind of things like, wage inequality. Why should this guy and this girl be paid different when they have the exact same jobs, when they have the exact same positions, when they have, and that even crosses the racial divide as well. Black males, they're normally the least called back, and they make less than their white counterparts in the exact same positions. So to say, I think that what we need is more of a highlighting of the actual issues that we face in society, rather than really focusing on some guy's shirt and totally, dismissing the fact that he landed a probe on a comet for science. It's things like that I think that we really kind of need to really be focusing on. And I think the reason why radicals are so loud now is because we've allowed them to get so loud in any movement. In Christianity, the radicals are so loud. You don't really see news reports about really reasonable Christians that are out there and doing good things. You do see them sometimes, but if you really think about it, you see more of the radicals being put out there and being highlighted. And I think that if we try to speak out more and we try to be louder than the feminists, or not feminists in general, but the more radical portions of feminism that are really seeking to really clue in on minute details and act like they are the biggest issues that we have. I think if we speak out about the real issues and really push those issues, but also condemn, the issues that are really minute and that we might want to tackle one day and whatnot, but it's really hard to justify tackling those minute things, those small things, when we have, other more important things that we have to overcome first. So I think if we're wanting to really change the tide, I think that we just need to be a bit more vocal. We need to be more loud. We need to also speak out and condemn those opinions and the way that some people are trying to push, the feminist movement, if you'll call it that, in those radical directions. So to answer your question, Ale, is that's how I would approach that.
Dead air is useless. I didn't hear anything that GE just said. So I'm going to radically change subjects. We were going over the wage thing in the chat with everybody, apparently, while GE was talking. And I think I just want to put it out there that the wage gap exists, quote unquote, but it's smaller than people think it is, because the 77 or 70 cents on the dollar doesn't take into account a huge number of variables that we know of. And when those are taken into account, things like hours worked, type of job actually chosen, education, work experience, like all these other various factors, the gap just keeps shrinking the more variables are taken into account. And all we could say is that remainder, whatever percentage, if it's just like 2% or 5%, we just don't know what that is. Like, it could be discrimination, but there's no way to actually determine that that's exactly what is causing it. And that's kind of the issue, is people want to make the jump and say, oh, it's sexism. Sexism is causing that. And you can't say that. Like, that's not how science does. So
right, you don't know definitively. You don't know definitively that that's what's causing it, but the highest estimate, when all the factors are accounted for, is about 9 cents. So that's pretty much the max. So let's just go with that 9 cents.
No, but even then, like, we don't know what the other factors could even be.
Yeah. We don't know that it's all discrimination against women. We don't know that. So let's just take the 9 cents and say, okay, look, we know all of these factors are involved, and we know that for the most part there is wage equality. So now let's move on to a more important issue. Like, I actually got into this at work because, as I mentioned before, I'm a special emphasis coordinator. March is Women's History Month, so President Obama signed out another order that came out that put the wage gap at 77 cents again, like he did last year. And I got into a lot of hot water for bringing up actual statistics and data and evidence that show that it's not really 77 cents when you take all of the factors into account. And so we really need to put that to bed. There is a wage gap, and it may, even if we take the full 9 cents, it may not all be due to discrimination. But I think that for the most part, we've pretty much put that to bed. Now, if we want to make arguments about a wage gap, let's look at a couple other countries. Let's look at their wage gaps, like real actual wage gaps, and let's work to fix that. As a feminist, that's what interests me. Like, let's help the most amount of people possible. If we're gonna cry wolf over a 9 cent, okay, yeah, it's terrible, a 9 cent wage gap. It is terrible. But if we're gonna cry foul over that when there's so many more atrocities happening, it's just bullshit to me. And so that is probably why we have 15 dislikes and counting on the video. Alex.
All right. Well, as before, a lot of things have happened in my silence, but yeah, I can definitely agree with the general consensus that seems to be going on the wage gap. I saw one thing where the average hours worked per day by men was 8.5, average by women was roughly around 8. So if you have an extra 2.5 hours per week, yeah, that definitely adds up. So there's a clearly non-discriminatory thing, and I appreciate that that GodWorks is, basically saying that we do need to focus on more important issues if and when they arise. Shirtgate, not that important in the grand scheme of things, especially if you're focusing on other countries where, I think it was Iran, where women cannot check out a book from the library without a male chauffeur. I don't freaking know. But if that's your focus, I completely commend that. Although that does not seem to be the focus of a lot of, well, what you might call pop culture feminism. And I will say that the stuff I've written on my blog does tend to address the more pop culture kind of feminism, which, again, does kind of seem to have the largest voice. So there's that. Let's see. And yeah, I can agree with the idea, or rather I can understand the idea that feminism has been hijacked, as you put it, which, in fact, Christina Hoff Sommers, who does call herself a feminist, has a book that she wrote, I believe in the 80s, called Who Stole Feminism, where she explains how she herself found herself kind of alienated from, feminism as it changed from kind of second wave to third wave. And that does tie into another point I believe you mentioned about past oppression, and I guess what could tie into past versions of feminism. And if I may paint an analogy, Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. Dwight D. Eisenhower was a Republican. But they can hardly be held up as examples of good, strong Republicans these days, because the Republican Party is just so vastly different from what it was in Abraham Lincoln's time and even Dwight Eisenhower's time. And so in that sense, and because I've heard this argued, not necessarily here, but in other places, is, well, feminism has done so much for everyone in the past, that means it's still relevant in the future. It's like, now. But, well, yeah, but it's a very different movement now than it used to be, and I can definitely agree that countries like Iran, with those examples, yeah, they can use some first and second wave feminism there. But because I've heard this largely in the context of women who disagree with feminism, other women will shoot back at them, well, hey, feminism got you all this great stuff, and they say, yeah, I know, but that was that other feminism. This is something very different. It's using the same name, and maybe it's been hijacked. So I guess that's a point that I'd like to throw out there, but also kind of just agree with, and there's my 2 cents, I guess. I get, like I said, I've been taking notes as I've been quiet. I think that's most of what I'd like to comment on those topics.
All right, just as a time note here, we're already at an hour and a half in, so yeah. Just in case any viewers are wondering, we are foregoing Hypocrite of the Week this week, just because feminism is such a broad topic, and we pretty much knew that we were going to be speaking for a while on it. So, no Hypocrite of the Week. But that doesn't mean that we need to extend this episode on for another hour, okay? Because I got things to do. So, you guys go ahead.
Dater does not miss Aeolus's yell. Thank you. That was put in the chat, and just for everyone that's listening, yeah, every single time Aeolus does his little yell, I mute my mic, or I mute my sound every time. I've heard it like twice in the last like 15 shows.
All right. Well, if
Anywho.
you guys, if you guys are up for it, and if not, that's okay. But we can kind of segue to, there was a story, and I don't have the details in front of me. We kind of discussed it amongst ourselves a little bit the other day. But there was a story where there was a college student somewhere at this college or university. I don't recall exactly where. Maybe you guys recall the details. But basically, he was removed from a class. I want to say it was a sociology class because he was making some controversial remarks about feminism, kind of denying that rape culture exists and things of that nature. Basically, some of the women in the class were feeling uncomfortable that he was making these comments. I guess some of them had been victims of, sexual assault, things of that nature in the past, and they were just really made uncomfortable by this. It seemed to me that the professor in this class really went to great lengths to try to, resolve this issue without having to silence this student or kick him out of the class. But eventually just got to the point where he was being uncooperative, and apparently just it wasn't adding to the discussion at all, and it was just making things uncomfortable for everybody in the class. So I don't know if any of our viewers had seen that story, or if you guys recall any more of the details, but if you want to go ahead and chime in on that, what your thoughts were.
I've actually, sorry, can I go? Yeah. I have actually heard of that story. I mentioned it, I posted it on my personal Facebook just to see what people thought of it, and I made sure to specify that I'm not quite sure how to feel about it because I wasn't there, but it does seem to be the case that following the story that, the male in question initially was raising some very reasonable questions, but it does seem to be that he got kind of out of hand, overboard, and I think it was like part of the story was that he likes to challenge people's worldview, as in like, the polite way of saying just be a dick almost. So, and I can absolutely sympathize with getting silenced for disagreeing with feminist theory, but at the same time, the way the story is written anyway, it doesn't seem that that's quite what was going on. It does seem, as Prototype said, that the professor did take pretty reasonable measures to, to make this discussion okay, and I can completely understand if the guy just went overboard. That's not to say that there's no such thing as censorship for not being a feminist, but I don't think this story is illustrative of any sort of thing. I think it's reasonably clear that the guy was just being kind of over the top, like, okay, let it go, we all understand, and maybe he wasn't. So I wouldn't really peg this as a like free speech or feminism kind of story. It's just kind of interesting, honestly.
Yeah, this sort of stuff happens a lot when it's popular, like, it's not even a popular position, but it's a popular thing to talk about and point at and laugh at, and it riles up people in conversations. But I agree with Alex. If you read more into the story, this guy just seemed to be an asshole, and assholes do sometimes have opinions that may or may not be accurate, but it doesn't make them less of assholes. So, assholes of the world, get better tactics.
Yeah, and I will say that in my 4-year education in philosophy, man, there's an endless supply of people who just will not understand the topic of the conversation and will not go along with being productive in a classroom discussion type environment. When you set forth certain premises like, okay, this is the particular argument that we're talking about, and then somebody wants to bring it back to another argument all the time and talk about the problems with that and stuff like that. It's like if you're trying to talk about Buddhism and somebody goes off about why Hinduism is wrong. Like, yeah, it's that sort of thing happens all the time, especially in a college atmosphere when smart kids who maybe were not so accepted previously, like, learn that they're smart and that intelligence can actually be useful to them, so then they go overboard with it in class. I say this because I was one of those people when I first went to college, absolutely. So yeah, I think we pretty much all came to an agreement that it seemed like this kid was maybe out of line, and it maybe didn't have so much to do with his views. Now that being said, I will say my wife she minored in women's studies when she was in college, and she took some classes that were absolutely ridiculous, where some of the claims were just off the wall, nonsensical. She had an entire class where the premise was that women are more connected to nature than men. There may be some reasons to believe that, but that's pretty fucking crazy, right? So it's absolutely there's definitely some nonsensical stuff out there, and that does actually bring me back to a point that was raised earlier, which is that in feminist theory there absolutely is some wrong-headed stuff. There's some nonsense for sure. Just like in you know, racial theory in an African American studies program or something like that, there will probably also be claims that are pretty ridiculous. But we shouldn't let that diminish the entirety of the movement or the foundational premises that we're operating from. And I think we've all been kind of in line with that. That there are definitely things happening in feminism that we don't like, for sure. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the entire movement should be thrown out. Just like in atheism, I don't care for Christopher Hitchens, even though he was a super prominent atheist. But you know, it doesn't diminish my atheism in any way that Christopher Hitchens was out there saying stuff I disagreed with. So yeah.
I think we've all kind of plateaued on this story, so I'm not entirely sure where to go from there.
Well, actually, I was gonna throw in my opinion. Sorry, I'm kind of eating at the same time. I've been very, I guess, handling this story, I guess, very carefully, because I don't feel like we have the whole story behind it. I'm not sure exactly what went on. All I know for sure is that a kid got kicked out of one part of his class because he was perceived as being an asshole during it. But you know, if he in fact was just being an asshole and just trying to make people uncomfortable and really just trying to disrupt the classroom setting, I think that it was fully justified that he got kicked out, and it was in no part because of his what he was saying exactly. It's more his attitude. I think that you can definitely, you know, you can definitely discuss topics that nobody likes talking about without being an asshole about it. But if he was sincere in what he was saying, which I'm not saying that he was, I'm saying that these are the two directions that I could go. If he was sincere about it, then I don't think that he should have necessarily been kicked out. But, you know, if he in fact was being an asshole, then I think that it was very much so needed as far as the classroom setting goes, because I think it's really incumbent upon the teacher to provide a space of learning. And if you have a guy that's there and he's disrupting the class and he's really taking away from the educational experience that these kids have actually funneled a lot of money into, I think it's very justifiable that he got kicked out.
Yeah, let's go ahead and wrap up on this guy. I mean, we're all familiar with the young gun college kid, anarchist, you know, trying to sabotage the classroom. We can't have that going on. And regardless of what his views were, it doesn't matter how right he was or how, you know, perfectly logical his arguments were. If he's sabotaging the classroom environment, we just can't have that. It doesn't matter if he got banned. You know, there are other students there that we have to focus on. And as we've pretty much hit on here, he seems like an asshole. And it seems that, yeah, he basically was detracting from the environment. Even though some of the things he said may make sense to you, you can't just say, oh, he made sense. Why are they silencing him? You know, it's not that simple. So, moving on here. To wrap up on feminism, because now it's 10:36. I'm still a feminist. I'll be a feminist until I go. But I think that I'm having a chat here with Dark Tribute in the comment section of the YouTube video about how these radical feminists seem to only care about the issues that concern them. I think an argument could be made there. I think, like G said, we need to get more vocal about what feminism actually is supposed to be, and we need to fix those things. There are real issues that are going on. And I'm not saying that any of these social issues are less important to people here in America. But there are issues, and a lot of people get crucified for this, the X is not greater than Y thing, okay? Yes, but I'm sorry to tell you that a shirt is not fucking important when 11 million women are being trafficked into my state every year. Like, to me, that's serious. I'm still trying to figure out how and why, and there will be a video coming on that soon, just so you know. But, yeah, there are more serious issues, and we got to the way to gauge the seriousness of those issues, we can let Chad talk about this. The ethical decision that should be made in a situation is that the most amount of people should benefit from the time you put in. Okay? And what that basically means is if you're going to benefit like 5 people by Shirtgate, why are you wasting time on that when there's so many hundreds or millions of women that could be helped with the same amount of time? So, with that being said, I guess this is going to mark the beginning of feminism videos for me. I was trying to stay silent on this, but it seems that there's a greater issue here. And being a feminist who sees all of these things going on that need to be fixed, like, and listening to the things you guys are bringing up and perusing Venaloid's blog over the past couple days, trying to familiarize myself with some more of his content, because I'm only really familiar with his YouTube videos, which I did watch for a really long time in the past. I'm starting to see that this is really an issue. Like, we've got feminists out here that are doing things that are not considered feminism. So, I guess with that being said, here we go. We're going to start with this. But I do want to extend a very great thanks to Venaloid for coming on tonight. I don't know about you guys, but he is one of the YouTubers that I watched, and I've probably been watching his channel for quite a long time. He was one of the first people that I know I subscribed to when I joined YouTube, including the Godless Engineer. So not just tooting your horn here, Venaloid. I was subscribed to some people like you and the Godless Engineer as soon as I joined. So very familiar with the content, but can we mention real quick about Dieter's response video? Can we talk about that really quickly? Let's talk about that, because it's so hilarious.
Well, that was a while ago. I don't really remember it, and I didn't prepare for the show by watching it because I didn't know if it would even come up. So I guess Dieter wants to go over that.
No, my first question was if you even knew that I made it, because your video had like 9,000 or something views, and mine was significantly less.
I was made aware of it maybe several days ago, just in preparation for the show, because
that's lovely.
Well,
Prototype
Prototype was like,
did that.
Prototype was like, this guy made a response to you. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess he did. At some, honestly, I don't remember what it was about, or I don't know.
So your video was sent to me
Mm-hmm.
and said, hey, respond to this guy, and I'm like, okay, I'll just do that indiscriminately without researching you whatsoever.
Oh,
so I
right.
I assumed you were religious and were giving like a weird representation of atheists, so I just reviewed you as if you were religious. And I was like, okay.
It was
I don't
Hey,
think I was
your
rude.
defense, when we all seen the video, we were just like, Dieter, you know he's not religious, right? Like, we were all like, that video that you just made.
Yeah, let's all drag Dieter out by his ankles and laugh at him. Yeah.
That's what we do
To be
every
fair,
episode.
I think my video stands on its own merit. Like, it doesn't matter from what position. It just makes some of the phrasing I use kind of odd.
No,
But
I get
my
that.
points were still fine, I think.
Yeah, and I made that video forever ago. I'd have to refamiliarize myself, but I think it was the idea of atheists who say, well, God doesn't technically exist because existence means being made of matter and energy. Something. I think that was something.
I don't even remember. This is a terrible conversation because I don't think either of us remember what we said.
But we all do. But anyway, we really
everyone else
think,
does.
Yeah,
Don't
we
worry.
do. We really thank Venaloid for coming on, and it's not just, stroking you off by saying that we enjoy your content, because we actually do. I can speak for all of us on that. But we want you to go ahead and tell everyone where they can find you, and make sure you do a spectacular unveiling of that blog.
Yeah, so let's see. Obviously, there's my YouTube channel, which is Venaloid. I've got I've been typing the comments section of the YouTube stream, so that's of course my name there. As well as my blog, which if you type the word Venaloid into Google, it's Venaloid blog, and then followed by Venaloid YouTube, or vice versa, something like that. So yeah, I guess this is the grand unveiling of my blog, as it were. I really had no interest even to make a video explaining my blog, for the same reason I haven't made videos of the stuff on my blog, except I realize I probably should give some justification for why I haven't been making videos, so that might just come out. I may just use some of the clips from this video to make that video. But yeah, that's where I am on the internet, and I really appreciate everyone who's bothered to subscribe to my videos.
I subscribed to Venaloid today. I suggest everyone does as well. Are we doing like outros now, or is Venaloid exploding? Like, what's happening?
Yeah, let me just say thanks to Venaloid for joining us tonight. I definitely appreciate he's gone. See you later. No, I definitely appreciate that he was able to join us tonight, and I'm glad that he had this outlet, I guess, to explain what his blog was all about and all that. Since he hasn't been on YouTube for a while, so we resurrected Venaloid. He's back from the dead. Everybody, this is the power of reason. This is what we do. No, but thank you very much sincerely for joining us. It was a pleasure to get to actually meet you. And yeah, I guess we're just going to play it out. So I'm Prototype Atheist. You can find me on YouTube and Twitter, Facebook, all that good stuff. I feel like I'm taking a break from YouTube as well. I've only put out a couple videos this year, aside from clips from our broadcast here. I hope to be able to work on that in the near future and get something out to all my subscribers. So I guess just be patient, and I guess you can hold your breath. I don't think you'll die or anything. So I'm gonna try to get something out for you. That's it for me.
Since you mentioned that, I wanted to ask Venaloid a question about this, because it seemed like, I don't know, I'm kind of speaking for Brendan here, but it's almost seemed like he's kind of losing interest maybe in doing his own videos, and he's focused more on just putting out what we talk about on the show. But I wanted to ask you, like, how does that, like, what is that feeling like? What happens that makes people the next YouTuber to die? Not saying that you're dead, because obviously we performed a miracle here, okay? Jesus ain't got shit on us right now. But, like, how do you keep this thing going?
Well, one of the main reasons I've slowed down, and I say slowed down, I mean stopped. Every time you stop making a video, really, the reason I have my YouTube channel is because that's where I spit out what my brain has been chewing on. And unfortunately, recently my brain has just been chewing on something that's not really related to my channel. And so it seems kind of, I don't know, silly to post videos about it, especially considering that the thing my brain is chewing on, which is feminism, this kind of stuff, doesn't really have the same motivation for me to go that extra mile and make a good video out of it. So that's the thing. The other part of it is that this is my last semester in college, which, yes, it is supposed to be easy, but I am currently searching for a job. This past semester was my senior design project, and that was just like crazy as far as just scheduling goes. So for me, at least, it's been kind of a multitude of factors that have just come together at the wrong time, which is why I've been more absent in video making. So I don't know. Other people who leave, like if you've been around YouTube for a long time, there used to be Don Exodus 2. I believe he was some sort of biologist who. Oh, and CDK007, he is a biologist of some kind. They used to make awesome videos. I don't really know why they stopped making videos. It might and Theoretical Bullshit too. He's been a little more active recently, but it really depends. Sometimes your job just takes a different turn. Sometimes you feel like you've kind of said all you need to. Other times it might just be that you I don't want to say calm down about it, because that almost seems like childish thing to do. But maybe for the first few years, it's like, I'm an atheist. I'm going to go out and do all this cool stuff and everyone's wrong and blah blah blah. But you get more into the groove of it, you get a little more feedback on what you believe, and it might be that these people maybe don't have that sort of blind, I don't know, beginner's drive, as it were. That's just speculation. I did experience a little bit of that at some point in my YouTube, where I'm like, all right, tone it down a little bit, reflect a little bit, and so that does happen. But for me, as I said, it's been a multitude of factors that have unfortunately coalesced at once.
Do you think that so I don't know, I've just noticed that when I watch certain YouTubers, like when they do a video, if they're renowned for like doing anti-religion or atheism related videos, when they attempt to branch out and like make a different video, people are like, why the fuck is he doing this? Like, stick with religion. And like all of their videos, you can compare them, like you can look at them, they get significantly less views and likes. Do you think that like is a factor? Like at some point, you just get tired of talking about religion. You want to branch out, but people are not feeling that. They're not accepting it. They want you to keep doing the same thing. Do you think that may also be an issue?
I think that is definitely an issue. And in fact, one of the reasons why McDonald's is so successful, and don't worry, it makes sense. One of the reasons why McDonald's is so successful is because if you go to France, if you go to Russia, you go to China, yes, they have some different menu items, but more or less, you get what you expect. Is McDonald's in California, you'll get roughly the same thing as McDonald's in New York. And so, in that sense, as far as marketing goes, yeah, there's definitely that kind of limitation where if you start off, backing yourself into a corner saying, I'm only going to talk about this, and that's what you build your foundation on, and your audience expects that of you, yeah, then it is very hard to branch out. And certain people on YouTube have maybe not in their super intelligence seen that, but their channel has been partly about atheism, partly about politics or whatever they want to talk about, and so they kind of introduced the brand, as it were, as being this kind of diverse palette where some atheism, some politics, some this, which works if that's all the things you want to talk about, but unfortunately it also narrows your audience's range. If I'm going to talk about how I'm a pro-feminist, pro-gun, atheist, blah 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 blah, all these things, it's like I'm appealing to an incredibly narrow margin of people. So that's also something to note about that, and I'm sure that's why some people don't want to branch out, because they're just going to trim down their audience until there's like one person they can relate to. It's like, congratulations, thanks for using Friend Finder.
One thing I'm sorry, just
screw you, Dieter. Hey, screw you, Dieter. Okay.
Hey.
I let you go first tonight. Okay. You came first tonight. Okay.
Hey.
But while we're talking about this thing, like, I wanted to mention that the reason why we're asking him all these questions is because, compared to us, he's like a successful YouTuber, even though he's on his hiatus and everything. And it's something that obviously we're all trying to do. We're making these videos. Let's get a couple tips from him. He's over there getting thousands of views on a video, and he's still, I went and checked out a video like last week, and then when I checked it again this week, it had already went up like a significant amount of views, like more views than I get on most of my videos combined. So if you'd like to spare some of that knowledge before Dieter goes, give it to us straight. What do you think that we can do to make our content better, or to make our channels more appealing to more people? What works for you? What has worked for you?
There we go, got my mic. Let's see, I'll be really honest about that. Okay, I didn't cheat, but one of the things that I noticed really helped me out, that gave me a real kick in the butt as far as subscribers and notoriety, it was when I had about 800 subscribers, and I'd been steadily climbing over the years. I remember I made a video when I had 200 and blah blah blah, 800, and then at some point, Thunderfoot, having hundreds of thousands of subscribers, favorited a video of mine. I don't even know which one it was, and I just rocketed up past 10,000, past 1,000, and it kind of petered off, but not before I'd kind of broached 2,000. And at that point, it almost, I guess, you might say, hit a critical mass, where then you're talking in thousands, not hundreds, maybe. So in my case, it may have just been triggered by the fact that Thunderfoot favorited one of my videos, and suddenly it's like, oh, this Venaloid guy, everyone knows, you know, blah, 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 blah. So I might not be the best success story. I may have, in a sense, slept my way to the top, as, you know, like Eva Perón. So, barring that, though, man, I will say having a consistency in the custom thumbnails I've put up, I think helps people. They're like, oh, that's a Venaloid video, you know, with the green leaf background, which when I watch other YouTubers, that does help me personally, where I'm like, oh, you know, now this person talked about this, that's cool. Oh, then now they're talking about this, as opposed to thumbnail that might not be so consistent or eye-catching or something. Overall video quality, I think, is something that's good. I've invested in, I don't know if it's here, it's over there, a nice quality camcorder, as well as looked at some things to do with lighting. Unfortunately, pretty much everywhere I go, the lighting seems to be shit. So that's a thing. And really, I think part of it is really sitting back and mulling over the ideas, because like look at theoretical bullshit. He is like up in the 20s of thousands or more subscribers, and he is literally sitting at a webcam that you know drops frames, talking out of his bedroom or wherever. But he's like really popular, and the question is why? And I think the answer is because he really sits down and like chews on this. He chews on it until there's nothing left, and then he puts it out. And you know, part of it is that kind of honest reasoning where you not only sit down and say, okay, this is what I think, but you sit down and say, well, hang on, what would someone else object to in that? Are they right? And there have been videos where I've almost made them, and then I realize, oh shit, you know, this is a very good counter-argument. Maybe I should stop while I've not published it. So I guess that's a part, is just really being able to chew it out and not necessarily say, oh, I've got to get another video up in a week, you know, and that's actually one of the reasons why I didn't want to partner with Fullscreen. They made me an offer to, and I'm not quite sure how those things work, but one of their requirements was that I have some consistency in my videos, and I told them, well, that's just not how I operate. Sometimes I'm chewing on this and it takes a long time. Sometimes I've got like 3 ideas that are really related and throw them out there. So it really depends. And unfortunately, that does not make for consistent videos, which is another thing that I found people like, is consistent videos, like every week or so, because it's just kind of like, it refreshes them. It's like, yeah, this guy, oh, and there's this other thing. Whereas, you know, if you put out videos sporadically, people are kind of less in tune to it. I don't know how to describe it. I'm not a marketing person. I never will be. But it does seem to be that consistency in putting out videos like that is something that people enjoy, which does seem to conflict with the whole chew it all the way out as much as you can. So that's really all I can pretend to know about being a successful YouTuber at this point.
All right, well, now that we got that out of the way, Dieter had something that he wanted to say.
Probably at some point. I don't even remember at this. Oh no, I remember. All right, so possibility. Like I did this because I saw a lot of other YouTubers do this. Is when they find that they're definitely diverging in the various topics they want to talk about, they just make another channel. And then they have the channels very related to each other. Some people actually do a full-on, like, the exact same name with, like, an asterisk and then another word next to it. Like, the green version of some random food. I guess food is a bad example. The green version of some random product. And I did this with my channel because I did a bunch of things related to depression, but that doesn't have really anything to do with my social commentary or stuff about science or whatever. So I just made another channel and flushed all of my depression stories over to there. That's a terrible way of saying that. I transferred all of those videos, and now I have a daily vlog of depression stuff that goes on that channel. So my main channel is still way more popular, but it allows me to voice all the different opinions I have and still put them online somewhere where I think they can be useful. So
now,
that's one way of doing it.
To a small extent, I have done somewhat of that, although it was on my... I didn't make a new channel, but I do have a couple videos titled Random Tangents and then the topic, where I basically introduced it saying, these are just random thoughts I've chewed on not about atheism, but more just about life. I think one of them was about relationships, the other was about happiness. And there was a way to kind of differentiate those, even keeping on my main channel. I made the background of the thumbnail blue instead of green, so it's like, okay, it's like similar pattern, but clearly something different going on. So there is that, although if I had planned to make an entire series of random tangents, kind of takes away from the name itself. So you're probably right on that, making a whole new thing if that's going to be a big thing.
I'm just all over the place with all my content. Lately, I've been doing interviews with people, and then I try other things out. I haven't. I've really gone more the route of separate playlists, which I know in the past you've actually been able to subscribe to specific playlists so that you know when people have posted on that playlist, but I don't think that you can do that anymore. But yeah, I put all of my content pretty much on my main channel, and that kind of allows me to keep up that constant upload rate that you were talking about.
Yeah, I've kind of been doing that too, G. Like the wait just a hot damn minute. Like I initially intended that to have nothing to do with religion and atheism, but somehow like the things that make me say wait just a hot damn minute happen to be things that deal with religion and atheism, so it's hard to get away from that. But we're gonna go ahead and wrap up the show. Once again, we thank Venaloid for coming on. Can we get a round of applause for him? Yes. And we're sorry that Heina was not able to attend tonight. We hope that she is feeling better, and she plans to attend in the future. That's just a hope. Fingers crossed. So, yeah. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to tune in next week, Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, as always, for our Reason Live show. Don't forget to think skeptically, stay godless, keep calm, it seems legit, and check out the secularroundtable.com. Peace.